movie I'm going to talk about now is Nightmare Alley, the new Guillermo del Toro movie from last year, starring Bradley Cooper, Rooney Mara, and Cate Blanchett, and many others. Okay, I was really, really looking forward to this movie because I love Guillermo del Toro's movies. Like ever since I saw Pan's Labyrinth, I was in for the ride. Okay, not every movie he's made has blown me away. I remember seeing Crimson Peak and thinking, Shape of Water was okay. It again didn't really blow me away. It just kind of sometimes his movies kind of feel a little bit like a Jean-Pierre Jeunet kind of deal, which I'm sure he enjoys his work as well. But most of the time, really good movies, right? Guillermo del Toro, Hellboy movies, respect. And I was really looking forward to this movie. I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know anything about the story or anything, and it just seemed to me like it looked like an old-fashioned film noir kind of thing, like maybe a detective thing. I wasn't sure what it was going to be. I thought maybe it could be a murder mystery or something like that. I made a point to not really like read up anything on it before going in. I wanted to go in fresh, and I did. I managed to see that one in theaters recently, and I think there's a good amount to talk about. This was not the kind of story I thought it was going to be at all. Okay, the movie starts off, and you've got Bradley Cooper just dumping a body under a bunch of floorboards and setting it on fire, and then the whole house is set on fire, and then you just can't. No one mentions this ever, and then you kind of follow him as he's kind of a drifter at this point because he's done something bad. Obviously, we don't know what it is exactly, but he ends up in a carnival, in this really dodgy kind of like carnival, right? Where there's like you've got Willem Dafoe, who is basically kidnapping motherfuckers and just putting them in cages, getting them hooked on like opium, and then starving them so that that can be a show, I guess, where people can watch like this poor man, this poor geek, as they call him, come out of the cage and like eat a live chicken in front of everybody. Just like dig into that live chicken. It's the worst show ever. Why would you ever pay for this? But Willem Dafoe's character explains that it's like people like to feel better about themselves. So by seeing someone who's like rock bottom, they're just like, hell yeah. But still, it's the good thing about this movie is that the carnival, at first you're like, well, I guess this might be normal for the time. These carnivals were probably like that. And but no, because then the cops show up and they're like, we gotta close this place down. This is a big problem. But yeah, so you've got Willem Dafoe, who's this dodgy guy. His whole like tent is he's got like this collection of babies in jars, and it's just super weird. Especially there's one baby in particular. The movie is really proud of that one baby in the jar. Which has a whole story where like he killed his mom when he came out of the womb or something ridiculous like that. But that was very much a Guillermo del Toro, like touch in there. My favorite moment of this movie is there's a romantic scene between two characters, and we'll get to that. There's a romantic scene, and it's in that room. There's a really romantic scene. It's like, let's run away together, but they're surrounded by fucking baby jars. And it's hilarious. I just love that contrast. I think that was the perfect place to set a love scene. Beautifully done. Beautifully done. And speaking of beautifully done, this movie is beautifully done. Nightmare Alley is a gorgeous movie to look at from beginning till end. The cinematography is wild. So freaking good. Whether it's the very Guillermo del Toro kind of stylistic touches, like the like one of the fun houses has like all these like weird eyes and stuff. Whether it's like crazier stuff like that, or it's just very simply the kind of film noir look that the film has. It's just a very beautiful looking movie. Like it's just so pretty. Like even like when the movie gets a bit slow, because it's a long movie. It's like 2.5 hours, okay? So at about 2 hours in, I was like, you know what? This is way too long for what it is. This is way too long. But you know what? I'm enjoying this, because this is exactly the kind of story that I like. I love this kind of rise and fall kind of story, like Citizen Kane type of deal. I love film noir. I love the look of this movie, the kind of dark vibe that it has. I could see what Guillermo del Toro was doing, and I was really loving it, even when it felt a bit long. Now, in the movie, Bradley Cooper, going back to the beginning, he's a drifter. He gets a job. Willem Dafoe hires him, and he gets a job in the carnival. He meets this lady played by Toni Collette, who is great. I mean, is there anything that Toni Collette is not great in? She's really good. She's the kind of girlfriend, I guess, of this old magician guy. And the old magician guy is an alcoholic, and he's having some troubles, and, you know, he's on his last legs kind of thing. But Bradley Cooper eventually wants that magician guy to teach him what he knows, like teach him his tricks. But he's not just a magician, he's a mentalist as well, which is like, you can kind of like those guys that just kind of, they can look you up a little bit like Sherlock Holmes, and they pick out little details and they fill in the blanks, and they know how to manipulate you kind of thing. And then they can play tricks on you like that, you know? But just kind of guessing what kind of person you are. So that magician guy also has this talent as well. And there's some weird stuff where Bradley Cooper gets with the girlfriend, and it's kind of awkward. But Bradley Cooper falls in love with this girl who has like this show where she can conduct electricity through her. And at first, I thought that whole act was bullshit. But it turns out she can actually do this. So I was just like, what the fuck? These people are magical after all. But yeah, she's played by Rooney Mara, and that's where the love scene comes in later on. Bradley Cooper tries to get Rooney Mara to run away with him. Ron Perlman, who of course is in this movie because it's a Guillermo del Toro movie. So you've got Ron Perlman kind of, you know, looking after her, beating the shit out of Bradley Cooper because he doesn't want him to take advantage of her. And it turns out that was actually a good instinct. That was a good instinct because Bradley Cooper turns out to be a piece of shit in this movie. And it's interesting the way they've done it, because I was worried early on that Bradley Cooper was really not saying that much. He was very restrained in this movie, and I was like, oh my God, is this going to be him the whole movie? But it turns out they were just burying the lead at how bad this guy is. You know, this guy is rotten. This guy is hopeless. Like, you think he's a nice guy that just goes in over his head, because once they go to the city, he becomes very popular. He becomes like a mentalist, and that's after that the magician guy kind of dies because of him, basically, because he gave him some booze and he died after that. We don't know if he poisoned the booze or anything, but it's very dodgy scene. Anyway, the old magician guy dies. He takes the book that the magician had with all his tricks and secrets, and takes it to the big city, and he becomes huge. Unfortunately, he meets his match. You know, he meets his match in Cate Blanchett, who is this mysterious woman. She's a psychologist, I believe. She challenges him, basically, in front of everybody, to guess what's in her bag. And, she takes over the show, basically. And he manages to get her on that. And she gets pissed off. And Cate Blanchett's amazing. I mean, Cate Blanchett is honestly amazing in everything as well. It's a great cast, really. Like, this movie is worth seeing for the cinematography and the cast alone. You know, and Guillermo del Toro. Man, she is very, very good. And that's where the movie, however, kind of starts to go downhill a little bit. Bradley Cooper becomes a douchebag. He treats Rooney Mara like shit. And he goes too far. Because initially, even the old magician dude, if they were going to trick someone, they would tell them afterwards, you know, it's bullshit. You know, we're very sorry. It's just part of the act. This is not actually real. And, the Toni Collette character is also one of these, like, pretend mediums, you know, that she picks someone of the audience and they're like, this will happen to you. I can feel your brother next to you, you know. But afterwards, they're always like, we're very sorry. This was part of the act. Don't take it seriously, okay? But he crosses that line. Bradley Cooper dares to just con people. He just full on becomes a con man, because it's making him a lot of money. So he kind of works something out with Cate Blanchett where he tells her everything about himself. He tells her the truth, and she can record it. She can do whatever the hell she wants. And then in return, he gets money, and he gets this job with Richard Jenkins, I believe, who's hired him because he wants to talk to some girl from his past. And Richard Jenkins, again, is so freaking good in this movie. Everyone is so freaking good in this movie. So it's even more tragic that this movie kind of falls apart a little bit in the kind of, I don't want to say second act. In the third act, really, is when, like, between the second and third act is when it starts going downhill. But it doesn't come crashing down, you know. It's not like, you know, it's not like some movies where it's just like, this is shit. It just doesn't live up to the build-up. And that's a shame. And honestly, the very last scene, okay, while it is wildly predictable, okay, you can tell straight away what the last scene is going to be in this movie. And you can tell pretty much what the third act of this movie is going to be. That's one of the big problems, is how predictable it is at the end. It's a good scene. The final scene of this movie is very well done, and Bradley Cooper nails it. It's a shame. It's such a shame, because there was this big build-up, and you have no idea where it's going to take you. You kind of feel like it could just pull the rug from under you, like The Prestige. This movie should have gone the Prestige route and done something crazy. In the second half of its second act, it should have just pulled the rug from under you and been like, hey, here's some crazy shit. That's what this movie should have done, and it doesn't do that. It turns out that especially because the writing is so good, like, so far. Like, for most of the movie, the writing is quite sharp. The dialogue is very witty. And it really does feel like you're watching something like Double Indemnity, like a film noir. However, you know, you've got this kind of promise that, hey, something wild is going to happen. Something supernatural is going to happen. But it doesn't. I mean, spoilers. He gets betrayed by the most obvious character to betray him. And then that's how the movie ends. And that's it. I'm just like, wait. That's it? Like, he just goes back to the carnival. And it's just like, bro, did we really go all this way? 2.5 hours this movie is just to get there? And it's just like, I guess that's part of the point, you know, like they want to do a loop kind of thing where, like, he starts off in his rock bottom, he's at the top, back to rock bottom kind of thing, but even lower than he was at the beginning. But it's like, you can still do that and give the audience some suspense. You can still do that and give the audience something really, like, mind-blowing and something they'll never forget. And this movie, unfortunately, didn't do that. This is a movie that I might forget eventually, even though I liked it. I did enjoy this movie for the most part. I wish it had delivered something better for the end. If you think that it's going to take you somewhere really, really cool, then it's a big drop down. You know, when you get to the end, you're like, oh, that's a shame. And if you're just kind of sitting around for the ride, you might have a good time. But again, it's like, it's going to be hard for the movie to keep your attention for 2.5 hours. You know, and it's, you know, this movie is worth seeing. I'm going to tell you that. I enjoyed this movie more than I did Crimson Peak. And actually, Crimson Peak is one of those movies I'm talking about where, like, it kind of crumbles at the end. Like, it's a similar problem. Now that I think about it, Crimson Peak had a similar problem than this movie does, which is, like, it's got this interesting build-up, really interesting, cool visuals. But then at the end, it kind of gets all muddled. It gets all muddled and just not as interesting as you thought the payoff was going to be. And you've got a great cast as well. So this movie is more in the vein of something like Crimson Peak. Definitely. Because Shape of Water, you know, it's not a movie that'll blow your mind like you've never seen any of this before. It's actually the movie freaking rips off Splash. It's literally Splash. This movie... This Shape of Water movie is literally Splash. It's like the end of Splash. So it's nothing like that new and mind-blowing. But at least The Shape of Water has a satisfying ending. You know, it's got a satisfying beginning, middle, and end, and it works all together really well. Whereas Crimson Peak and this movie just... Man, they've got so much potential. There's so much good stuff about these movies. And yet they just can't come up with a really cool resolution. And I feel like sometimes Guillermo del Toro is like holding back, and I don't like that. I like Hellboy 2, Golden Army, Guillermo del Toro. I like Blade 2, Guillermo del Toro. I'm going to tell you that right now. I like Blade 2, Guillermo del Toro. Guillermo del Toro needs to always go all out, in my opinion. But I feel like he's kind of restrained with some of the stories he has sometimes. And it's just like, I just wish that he would look at the script sometimes and be like, you know what? Fuck it. giant snake. I don't know, something. Just like Pan's Labyrinth. Oh my god, this movie never stops pulling the rug from under you. Amazing movie. And I feel like, man, this movie could have been so freaking good. This movie could have been so freaking good. Even as far as he could have done like a kind of he could have done something where, like, you know, maybe he does develop some kind of power, and then you end up in this other dimension where everything's kind of the same but slightly different and twisted. Like the carnival is even worse than you could have possibly imagined. And he sees the carnival for what it really is, just this horrible place. You could have done something with that. Having said that, I do recommend watching this movie. If you like Guillermo del Toro movies, you'll enjoy the style of this movie. The cast is worth it. The freaking even the third act has some good parts in it with Richard Jenkins, you know? Like, the cast is awesome. The build-up is really, really good. There's a lot of good ideas in this movie. Even the way the movie kind of wraps itself up is really clever. The cinematography, the kind of weird visuals, and very offbeat carnival there. It's a good movie. Even the music is really good. It's a good movie. It just could have been so much better with just a couple of changes here and there, and it just wasn't. So just bear that in mind. Long build up, not worth it, really, like the final act. But you know what? The ride up until this point, solid. Pretty good. Pretty darn good. So there you go. That's my take on Nightmare Alley. I would recommend it. Just bear in mind it might not deliver exactly the goods that you think it will. Comparable to another Cate Blanchett movie, The Gift, which very good movie. Very good movie. Great build-up. That was a Sam Raimi movie. Just the very end just doesn't quite get there. You needed something else, you know? But still worth watching. I'd still recommend the Gift, definitely. But yeah, I'm going to be talking about Don't Look Up next. So check that out.